The morning sun cast long shadows across Naval Amphibious Base Coronado as Sarah Martinez pulled into the parking lot, her beat-up Honda Civic looking completely out of place among the military vehicles. At 26, she had shoulder-length brown hair usually tied back in a practical ponytail, calloused hands from years of rock climbing, and a quiet determination that most people mistook for shyness. What they didn't know was that Sarah had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Sarah worked as a civilian contractor for the Navy, specializing in equipment testing and physical training program development. Her background in exercise physiology and her obsession with endurance sports had landed her this job 6 months ago. Every day she watched the elite Navy SEALs train. Their incredible physical capabilities both intimidating and inspiring. They were legends in their own right, warriors who could swim for miles, run marathons in full gear, and push their bodies beyond what most people thought humanly possible. The SEALs had a tradition that had stood unchallenged for 2 years. Every quarter, they held an unofficial competition called the Gauntlet, a grueling combination of swimming, running, obstacle course navigation, and strength challenges that tested every aspect of physical fitness. The current record holder was Chief Petty Officer Jake "Iron" Morrison, a 6'3" powerhouse who had dominated military athletics for over a decade. His record time of 4 hours and 37 minutes seemed untouchable. Sarah had been watching these competitions from the sidelines, taking notes for her research on optimal training methods. She noticed patterns, inefficiencies, and areas where technique could triumph over brute strength. Her climbing background had taught her that sometimes the smallest person could conquer the biggest challenges through superior strategy and mental toughness. She had been quietly training on her own, using the base facilities after hours, refining techniques that the SEALs had never considered. The idea first struck her during a particularly intense gauntlet competition 3 months earlier. As she watched Morrison power through the final obstacle course, she realized that his approach, while effective, wasn't necessarily the most efficient. He relied heavily on upper body strength where leverage could work better. He chose direct routes where alternative paths might save time. Most importantly, he paced himself like a sprinter rather than an endurance athlete. Sarah began her own training regimen that night. She studied every component of the gauntlet, breaking it down into measurable segments. The 2-mile ocean swim that opened the competition favored her background as a college swimmer. The 5-mile run through soft sand would challenge her, but her marathon training had built the necessary endurance. The obstacle course was where she saw the greatest opportunity. Her rock climbing experience had given her an understanding of efficient movement and body positioning that even elite soldiers often lacked. For 3 months, she trained in secret. Before dawn and after sunset, she could be found running the same routes, swimming the same waters, and practicing on makeshift obstacles. She studied videos of past competitions, timing each segment and identifying where seconds could be saved. Her climbing friends thought she had lost her mind when she started incorporating military-style workouts into their weekend adventures. The breakthrough came during a casual conversation in the base cafeteria. Sarah was sitting alone, reviewing training data on her laptop, when Morrison and 3 other SEALs sat at the nearby table. They were discussing the upcoming quarterly gauntlet, debating whether anyone could ever beat Morrison's record. The conversation grew louder and more competitive, with each SEAL boasting about their own capabilities. "Nobody's touching that record," Morrison declared, his voice carrying across the cafeteria. "I've been perfecting this for years. These young guys coming through training are strong, but they don't have the experience or the mental game." Petty Officer First Class David Chen, one of the newer SEALs, disagreed. "I think I've got a shot, Chief. My swim times have been improving, and I've been working on my transition speed between events." Morrison laughed, not mockingly but with genuine confidence. "Chen, you're a hell of a warrior, but the gauntlet isn't just about individual skills. It's about sustaining maximum effort across completely different physical demands for over 4 hours. It's about pushing through when your body is screaming at you to quit. Sarah found herself listening intently, her data forgotten. This was exactly what she had been preparing for. She had run the calculations dozens of times. Her projected time, based on her individual segment performances, would shatter the existing record by over 20 minutes. But projections and reality were different things, especially under the pressure of competition. The conversation continued with other SEALs chiming in about their own potential attempts. Then Morrison made the comment that changed everything. Hell, at this point, I'd welcome any challenge. Man, woman, doesn't matter. Nobody's even come close to my time in 2 years. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever get pushed to really dig deep again. Sarah's heart raced. This was her opening, but she hesitated. Challenging elite military personnel seemed presumptuous, even reckless. She was a civilian contractor, not a warrior. These men risked their lives for their country while she analyzed spreadsheets and wrote reports. Who was she to think she could compete at their level? But then she remembered every training session, every calculated strategy, every moment she had pushed herself beyond what seemed possible. She thought about her college swimming coach who had taught her that champions weren't just the strongest or fastest, but the ones willing to attempt what others wouldn't even consider. She closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and walked over to their table. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation about the gauntlet competition." The 4 SEALs looked up, surprised. Morrison smiled politely. "Oh, hey, Sarah, right? You're the contractor working on the training analysis project." "That's right," she confirmed. "I've been studying the gauntlet for my research, and I was wondering—" She paused, knowing that her next words would either open an incredible opportunity or make her a laughingstock. "Do you mind if I try?" The table went silent for a moment before Chen let out a small chuckle. Morrison's eyebrows raised in genuine surprise. "Try what, exactly?" "The gauntlet. I'd like to attempt to beat your record." The silence stretched longer this time. Morrison's expression shifted from surprise to something that might have been admiration, though Sarah couldn't be sure. The other SEALs exchanged glances, their reactions ranging from amusement to curiosity. "Sarah," Morrison said carefully, "I appreciate the enthusiasm, but the gauntlet isn't just a fitness test. It's designed to push elite military personnel to their absolute limits. The insurance alone would be a nightmare if a civilian got hurt attempting it." "I understand the risks," Sarah replied, her confidence building. "I've been training specifically for this for 3 months. I know every component, every safety protocol, and every technique. I'm not asking for special treatment or modifications. I want to attempt the exact same course under the exact same conditions." Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Webb, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "What makes you think you can compete with us? No disrespect, but we've been preparing for this kind of thing our entire careers." Sarah had anticipated this question. "My background is in exercise physiology and endurance sports. I've completed 3 Ironman triathlons, held the women's record on El Capitan for 2 years, and spent the last 6 months studying every aspect of your training methods. I'm not saying I'm stronger or tougher than any of you, but I think I've identified ways to complete the course more efficiently." Morrison studied her for a long moment. Around them, other conversations in the cafeteria seemed to fade away. Sarah could feel other personnel beginning to notice their discussion, though she couldn't tell if it was her imagination or if word was already spreading. "This is insane," Chen muttered, but he was smiling as he said it. "Insane in a good way or insane in a call the medics way?" Webb asked. Morrison held up a hand to quiet his teammates. "Sarah, assuming we could even arrange something like this, what exactly are you proposing?" "I want to attempt the gauntlet next Friday during your regularly scheduled quarterly competition. Same course, same timing, same conditions. If I fail to beat your record, I'll donate $1,000 to the Navy SEAL Foundation and never mention this conversation again. If I succeed—" She paused, realizing she hadn't thought this far ahead. "If you succeed, you'll have earned the respect of every SEAL on this base," Morrison finished for her, "and probably scared the hell out of us in the process." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Master Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the senior enlisted SEAL on base. His presence immediately commanded attention from everyone at the table. "Chief Morrison," he said, nodding to the group. "I couldn't help but notice the intense discussion over here. Mind sharing what has everyone so focused?" Morrison looked to Sarah, giving her the choice of whether to explain or back down. This was her moment of truth. She could make an excuse and walk away, returning to her safe role as an observer and analyst, or she could commit fully to a challenge that would test everything she had worked toward. "Master Chief," Sarah began, "I've asked Chief Morrison if I could attempt to beat his gauntlet record next Friday." Rodriguez's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the slightest raising of his eyebrows. "I see. And what was Chief Morrison's response?" "We were just discussing the logistics and safety considerations," Morrison replied diplomatically. Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Ms. Martinez, isn't it? The contractor working on our training optimization project." When Sarah confirmed this, he continued, "I've read your preliminary reports. Impressive analysis. But analyzing performance and executing performance are very different challenges." "Yes, Master Chief. That's exactly why I want to attempt this. My research is only valuable if it can translate into real-world improvements. This would be the ultimate test of my theories." The Master Chief was quiet for several seconds, clearly weighing multiple factors. Finally, he spoke. "If we were to consider this, and I'm not saying we are, it would require approval from the commanding officer, a full medical clearance, additional insurance documentation, and signed waivers that would make a lawyer's head spin." "I understand, Master Chief. I'm prepared for whatever requirements are necessary." Rodriguez looked around the table at the four SEALs, each of whom nodded slightly. "Chief Morrison, what's your take on this?" Morrison's response would determine whether Sarah's challenge moved forward or ended before it truly began. She held her breath, realizing that her entire future might hinge on the next few words from a man she had barely spoken to before today. "Master Chief," Morrison said slowly, "I think it's the most interesting thing that's happened on this base in years. And if Ms. Martinez is serious about attempting this, I'd be honored to have my record challenged by someone who's put in the work to earn that opportunity." Rodriguez smiled for the first time since arriving at the table. "In that case, Ms. Martinez, I suggest you prepare for the most comprehensive pre-competition screening process you've ever experienced. If you pass all requirements, next Friday is going to be very interesting indeed." As Sarah walked back to her table, her laptop and research suddenly seemed insignificant compared to what lay ahead. She had 7 days to finalize her preparation and prove that her confidence wasn't just theoretical. The SEAL's chuckles as she walked away weren't mocking. They were the sound of warriors recognizing a worthy challenge when they saw one. The week that followed Sarah's challenge felt like the longest 7 days of her life. Word spread through the base faster than she had anticipated, transforming what she had envisioned as a quiet personal test into something approaching a spectacle. By Tuesday, personnel from other units were asking about the civilian who thinks she can beat the SEALs. By Thursday, someone had created an informal betting pool. Sarah's medical evaluation on Monday morning was more thorough than anything she had experienced, including her college athletic physicals. The Navy physician, Dr. Patricia Kim, put her through stress tests, cardiac evaluations, and joint mobility assessments that left her feeling like a laboratory specimen. The doctor's final assessment was cautiously positive. "Your cardiovascular fitness is exceptional, and your injury history is minimal. However, I want to be clear that this competition will push your body into zones where serious injury is possible, even for someone in your condition. The paperwork was equally daunting. Legal waivers, insurance forms, and liability releases created a stack of documents nearly 2 inches thick. Each page seemed to describe new ways the attempt could go catastrophically wrong. Sarah signed everything without hesitation, though her hand trembled slightly on the final signature. Morrison proved to be unexpectedly supportive during her preparation week. On Tuesday evening, he found her in the gym running through obstacle course movements on a practice setup. "Your technique on the rope climb is solid," he said, startling her mid-pull. "But you're wasting energy on the wall traverse. Watch." He demonstrated a more efficient hand placement that reduced the strain on her forearms by at least 30%. "The key is keeping your center of gravity as close to the wall as possible." "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked as they walked toward the exit. "I'm trying to beat your record." Morrison smiled. "Because if you're going to challenge it, you might as well do it right. A record that can't withstand a legitimate challenge isn't worth holding." He paused at the door. "Besides, I've watched you train. You're not just some weekend warrior looking for bragging rights. You've put in real work, and that deserves respect." Wednesday brought an unexpected visitor to Sarah's evening training session. Master Chief Rodriguez appeared as she finished her final practice swim, emerging from the base pool facility office as she climbed out of the water. "How are you feeling about Friday?" he asked without preamble. "Nervous," Sarah admitted, toweling off her hair. "But ready." "Good. Nervous means you understand what you're attempting." Rodriguez studied her for a moment. "I've been in the Navy for 22 years, and I've learned to recognize certain qualities in people. You have something that can't be taught or trained." "What's that, Master Chief?" "The willingness to attempt something that might be impossible. Most people avoid that feeling. You seem drawn to it." Thursday's final preparation session drew an audience. Word had officially spread beyond the base, and Sarah noticed several unfamiliar faces among the usual personnel. Someone had even contacted a local news reporter, though base security had prevented any media access. The pressure was building beyond anything she had anticipated. Chen approached her after she completed her final practice run through the obstacle course. "You know, Martinez, when you first asked to try this, I thought it was just talk. But watching you prepare this week, I'm starting to think Morrison might actually have something to worry about." That evening, Sarah reviewed her strategy one final time. Her projected splits for each segment were aggressive, but achievable based on her training times. The swim segment, 38 minutes compared to Morrison's 42. The run, 41 minutes versus his 47. The obstacle course, 53 minutes against his 59. The strength challenges, 21 minutes compared to his 24. If she could execute according to plan, her total time would be 2 hours and 53 minutes, breaking Morrison's record by over an hour and 40 minutes. But she knew that race day performance rarely matched training projections, especially under pressure she had never experienced before. Friday morning arrived gray and misty, typical for Coronado in November. Sarah arrived at the base at 500 hours, 2 hours before the competition start time. She had barely slept, her mind cycling through every possible scenario and contingency. The parking lot was already fuller than usual, and she realized that her attempt had drawn spectators from across the naval community. The pre-competition briefing took place in the same conference room where Sarah had first presented her training analysis research 6 months earlier. Now, instead of PowerPoint slides about optimization theory, she was receiving final safety instructions for an attempt that would test those theories under maximum stress. Morrison was already there when she arrived, along with Chen, Webb, and 2 other SEALs she didn't recognize. Rodriguez presided over the briefing with the kind of military precision that left no room for confusion or misinterpretation. The course remains unchanged from previous quarters. Rodriguez announced. 2-mile ocean swim from the North Pier to the South Beach marker, transition to the 5-mile soft sand run along the designated route, obstacle course navigation through all 24 stations, and finally, the strength challenge sequence. Ms. Martinez will follow identical protocols to military participants. Dr. Kim performed final medical checks on all participants. Sarah's heart rate was elevated but within normal pre-competition ranges. Her blood pressure showed the slight spike typical of competitive stress. "You're cleared for participation," Dr. Kim confirmed. "But remember our discussion about recognizing your limits during the event." At 06:30 hours, Sarah found herself standing on the North Pier alongside Morrison and 4 other SEALs who were attempting to improve their own times. The Pacific Ocean stretched before them, gray-green waters with moderate swells that would make navigation challenging but not dangerous. The distance to the South Beach marker seemed impossibly far. Morrison performed his usual pre-swim ritual, stretching and visualizing the route. Sarah noticed that he spent considerable time focusing on breathing techniques, something her swimming background made her appreciate. The other SEALs engaged in various psychological preparation methods, from quiet meditation to aggressive self-motivation. "Swimmers to your marks," Rodriguez called out from the timing platform. Sarah positioned herself at the edge of the pier, her race strategy crystallizing in her mind. The key was pacing, starting conservatively to preserve energy while staying close enough to the leaders to remain competitive. Her swimming background gave her confidence in the water, but she had never competed in ocean conditions with this much at stake. "This is it," Chen said quietly, positioning himself next to her. "Whatever happens, you've already proven something just by being here. Swimmers, prepare for start sequence." Sarah's heart pounded as she crouched at the platform edge. 6 months of research, 3 months of intensive training, and 1 week of psychological preparation had led to this moment. Around the base, word was spreading that the civilian contractor was actually going through with her challenge. Some spectators had gathered at various viewing points along the course route. "Go!" Sarah dove into the Pacific alongside 6 elite military athletes, the cold water shock immediately focusing her mind on the task ahead. The swim portion would establish whether her challenge was legitimate or merely an ambitious mistake that would end in the first 30 minutes. Her stroke felt smooth and powerful as she settled into race pace. Morrison had taken the early lead as expected, but Sarah was surprised to find herself keeping pace with Chen and Webb rather than falling behind as she had feared. The ocean swells were manageable, adding a rhythmic component to her stroke timing that actually felt helpful rather than hindering. At the 1-mile marker, indicated by a bright orange buoy, Sarah checked her position relative to the other swimmers. Morrison maintained his lead, but his advantage was smaller than his historical splits suggested it should be. Chen was struggling slightly with the ocean conditions, having trained primarily in pool environments. Sarah found herself in 4th position overall, ahead of 2 SEALs and behind only Morrison, Webb, and Petty Officer Jackson, who had entered as a wild card competitor. The 2nd mile proved more challenging as accumulated fatigue began affecting stroke efficiency. Sarah's swimming background became crucial here, as her technique remained consistent, while some competitors began showing signs of form breakdown. With half a mile remaining, she moved past Jackson, who was clearly struggling with the distance. As the South Beach marker grew larger, Sarah realized she was in 3rd place and closing ground on Webb. Her time projection for the swim segment looked accurate, possibly even conservative. Morrison remained in the lead, but by a smaller margin than his previous competitions had shown. Sarah emerged from the water 39 minutes after entering it, just 1 minute behind her projected time and only 3 minutes behind Morrison. The transition to running gear had been practiced dozens of times, but her hands shook slightly as she stripped off her wetsuit and pulled on running shoes. The combination of cold water exposure, competition adrenaline, and the realization that she was actually competitive was affecting her fine motor control. The 5-mile run along Coronado Beach's soft sand was where Sarah expected to lose significant ground to the SEALs. Their military training emphasized exactly this type of challenging running surface, while her marathon background was primarily on roads and trails. She had trained extensively on sand, but always wondered how much the difference in experience would matter. Morrison set a punishing pace immediately, clearly intent on using this segment to establish an insurmountable lead. Webb struggled with the transition from swimming to running, allowing Sarah to move into second place within the first half-mile. She had rehearsed this exact scenario during training and knew that maintaining contact with Morrison through the first 2 miles was crucial to her overall strategy. The sand was softer than usual due to recent rain, making each step require additional energy to maintain pace. Sarah's lighter weight became an advantage here, as she sank less deeply into the surface than her heavier competitors. Her breathing remained controlled while she could hear Webb's labored respiration behind her. At mile 2, marked by a red flag, Sarah was surprised to find herself closing the gap on Morrison rather than falling behind. His early aggressive pace was proving unsustainable, a tactical error she had predicted based on analysis of his previous competitions. Her endurance training allowed her to maintain consistent effort, while Morrison began showing signs of fatigue. Mile 3 brought the psychological battle that Sarah had prepared for, but never fully experienced. Her legs burned, her lungs demanded more oxygen than seemed available, and her mind began questioning whether continuing at this pace was sustainable. This was the moment that separated competitors from champions, where mental toughness mattered more than physical capability. Morrison must have been experiencing similar challenges because his lead continued to shrink. By mile 4, Sarah was running stride for stride with the defending champion, an outcome that seemed impossible when she had first conceived this challenge 3 months earlier. The final mile would determine whether her overall strategy remained viable. Morrison found another gear, drawing on reserves that demonstrated why he had held the record for 2 years. But Sarah's response surprised both of them. Instead of fading, she matched his acceleration. Her marathon training had taught her to save something for the final push, and she was about to discover whether that strategy would work in this entirely different context. They crested the final sand dune together, the obstacle course visible ahead like a medieval torture device designed to test every aspect of physical capability. Sarah's time for the run segment was 42 minutes, 1 minute faster than her projection and only 30 seconds behind Morrison. More importantly, she felt strong enough to tackle the most technically demanding portion of the competition. The crowd that had gathered at the obstacle course was larger than either of them had expected, including personnel from other military units who had heard about the unprecedented competition taking place. Sarah could see Chen and Webb finishing their runs several minutes behind, confirming that the real battle was between her and Morrison. As they approached the first obstacle, Morrison looked at her with what might have been surprise, respect, or tactical calculation. "Still feeling confident about those efficiency theories?" he asked, breathing hard but managing a smile. Sarah's response would have to come through performance rather than words, as the obstacle course demanded every bit of focus and energy she possessed. But for the first time since issuing her challenge, she truly believed that Morrison's 2-year-old record was within reach. The obstacle course stretched before them like a warrior's gauntlet designed by someone with a particularly creative imagination for human suffering. 24 stations tested everything from upper body strength to agility, balance, and problem-solving under extreme fatigue. Sarah had studied video footage of every obstacle dozens of times, but experiencing them after 90 minutes of maximum effort would be entirely different. Morrison attacked the first obstacle, a rope climb to a 30-foot platform, with the aggressive style that had served him well in previous competitions. Sarah watched him power up using primarily arm strength, a technique that was fast but energy expensive. When her turn came, she employed the leg-wrapping technique from her rock climbing background, ascending almost as quickly while conserving upper body strength for later obstacles. "Interesting approach," Morrison commented as they moved to the second station, a series of monkey bars spanning 40 feet over a sandpit. His breathing was noticeably heavier than Sarah's, confirming her theory that technique could compensate for differences in raw power. The monkey bars proved to be Sarah's first real advantage. Her climbing experience had developed exceptional grip strength and efficient movement patterns for this exact type of challenge. She completed the crossing 15 seconds faster than Morrison, opening her first lead of the entire competition. Station 3, a wall traverse requiring participants to move laterally across a 12-foot vertical surface using small handholds, was where Morrison's coaching earlier in the week proved invaluable. Sarah employed the center of gravity technique he had taught her, completing the obstacle smoothly while Morrison struggled slightly with his usual power-based approach. By Station 5, a complex balance beam sequence over water hazards, Sarah had opened a 45-second lead. The crowd of spectators, which now included personnel from multiple units and even some family members who had heard about the competition, was beginning to murmur with excitement. No one had expected the civilian contractor to be leading the defending champion halfway through the obstacle course. Morrison's competitive instincts kicked in at Station 6, a heavy bag carry combined with low crawl through muddy terrain. This was exactly the type of brute strength challenge where his military training should have provided a decisive advantage. He attacked the obstacle with renewed intensity, making up 20 seconds and closing to within 25 seconds of Sarah's lead. "Getting tired yet?" he called out as they approached Station 7, though his own breathing suggested the question might apply equally to himself. Sarah was indeed feeling the accumulated fatigue of 2 hours of maximum effort, but her endurance background had taught her to recognize the difference between discomfort and genuine exhaustion. Her body was protesting, but it wasn't failing. More importantly, her mind remained clear and focused on executing the technical elements that would determine the outcome. Station 8, a rope bridge crossing over a 20-foot gap, was where disaster almost struck. Halfway across, Sarah's fatigued grip nearly failed on a wet section of rope. She caught herself by shifting her weight distribution and employing a recovery technique she had never practiced, but somehow intuited from her climbing experience. The near miss cost her 10 seconds and reminded her that one mistake could end her challenge instantly. Morrison capitalized on Sarah's momentary struggle, attacking the rope bridge with controlled aggression that brought him back to within 15 seconds. The crowd's energy was building as it became clear that the competition was far closer than anyone had anticipated. Stations 9 through 12 tested agility and coordination. Tire runs, cone weaving, precision jumping, and a crawling sequence under barbed wire. Sarah's lighter weight and superior body awareness allowed her to maintain her slight lead, but Morrison's determination kept him close enough that any significant mistake would give him the advantage. Station 13 was a game-changer. A 30-foot rope climb followed immediately by a 40-foot rappel down the opposite side. Sarah's climbing background made this combination feel almost routine, while Morrison's traditional military approach proved less efficient. She gained 25 seconds, opening her largest lead since the early swimming portion. "How is she doing this?" Chen asked Webb as they watched from the sidelines, having completed their own obstacle courses several minutes behind. Webb could only shake his head in amazement. Master Chief Rodriguez was timing every split, his expression giving nothing away but his frequent glances at his stopwatch, suggesting that something unprecedented was happening. Stations 14 through 18 pushed both competitors deeper into fatigue territory. A sandbag carry, wall climbing sequence, tire flipping series, army crawl through muddy trenches, and a balance challenge that required crossing a narrow beam while carrying a 40-pound pack. Sarah's technique continued to prove more efficient than Morrison's power-based approach, but the cumulative effect of 2.5 hours of maximum effort was affecting both competitors. Morrison made his final major push at Station 19, a combination pull-up and leg raise challenge that played directly to his strength training background. He completed the required repetitions nearly 30 seconds faster than Sarah, closing to within 5 seconds of her lead. With 5 obstacles remaining, the competition had become too close to predict. Station 20 was where Sarah's research and preparation proved most valuable. The obstacle required participants to carry a series of weighted objects across uneven terrain while navigating around barriers. Most competitors approached it as a pure strength challenge, but Sarah had identified a more efficient route that reduced the total carrying distance by nearly 20%. She executed her planned approach flawlessly, reopening a 20-second lead that left Morrison visibly frustrated. Stations 21 and 22, a rope climb and descender combination followed by a complex agility course, saw both competitors operating on reserves they might not have known they possessed. Sarah's lead fluctuated between 15 and 30 seconds, but Morrison's relentless pressure never allowed her to feel secure. Station 23 presented the moment that would define the competition. A heavy sled pull over 50 yards of sand required participants to harness themselves to a weighted sled and drag it through soft, deep sand that made every step an individual battle. This was exactly the type of challenge where Morrison's superior size and strength should have provided a decisive advantage. Morrison attacked the sled pull with everything he had left, his competitive spirit refusing to accept that a civilian contractor might defeat him in his signature event. His powerful strides and efficient pulling technique began closing the gap immediately. Sarah felt the sled's resistance testing muscles that were already beyond normal fatigue levels, but she had prepared for this exact scenario during her training. Instead of trying to match Morrison's power, Sarah focused on maintaining consistent rhythm and efficient foot placement in the sand. Her breathing remained controlled while Morrison's became increasingly labored. With 20 yards remaining, they were pulling their sleds side by side, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. The crowd was now openly cheering, military protocol temporarily forgotten in the excitement of witnessing something that had never happened before. Personnel from other units had abandoned their duties to watch the final moments of an unprecedented competition. Station 24, the final obstacle, was a rope climb to a 40-foot platform, followed by a required 5-minute rest period before beginning the strength challenges. Both competitors reached the platform within 10 seconds of each other, exhausted but aware that the most grueling portion of the competition still lay ahead. During the mandatory rest period, Sarah tried to assess her physical condition honestly. Every muscle group was operating beyond normal capacity, her cardiovascular system was stressed to levels she had rarely experienced, and her hands were shaking from accumulated fatigue. But her mind remained clear, and she knew that Morrison was experiencing similar challenges. Morrison used the rest period to employ breathing techniques designed to maximize recovery in minimal time. His military training had prepared him for exactly this type of situation, where victory might depend on who could recover faster from extreme exertion. Dr. Kim performed mandatory medical checks on both competitors before they could proceed to the strength challenges. Blood pressure, heart rate, and hydration levels were all within acceptable ranges, though both competitors were clearly operating at their physical limits. The strength challenge sequence consisted of 4 exercises: maximum pull-ups, maximum push-ups, a plank hold for time, and a dead hang from a pull-up bar. Each exercise was performed to failure, with points awarded based on performance relative to body weight. This was where Sarah's research suggested she could make up significant time, as the scoring system favored efficiency over raw power. Morrison began with pull-ups, managing 37 repetitions before failure, an impressive total that demonstrated his upper body strength remained intact despite 3 hours of prior exertion. Sarah followed, employing a slightly different technique that emphasized lat muscles over biceps, achieving 31 repetitions. Morrison's advantage in the first exercise was smaller than expected. Push-ups were where Sarah had identified her best opportunity for competitive advantage. Her lighter weight and superior technique allowed her to complete 68 repetitions compared to Morrison's 71, a difference of just 3 repetitions despite significant disparities in size and strength. The plank hold became a mental battle as much as a physical one. Both competitors held the position well beyond normal fatigue levels, their core muscles trembling with effort. Morrison lasted 4 minutes and 18 seconds before form breakdown forced him to stop. Sarah maintained her plank for 4 minutes and 37 seconds, gaining crucial points that put her ahead in the overall strength challenge scoring. The final exercise, a dead hang from the pull-up bar, would determine the competition outcome. Both competitors' grip strength had been compromised by 3 hours of climbing, carrying, and obstacle navigation, making this a test of willpower as much as physical capability. Morrison managed 2 minutes and 43 seconds, an exceptional time under any circumstances, but particularly impressive given his accumulated fatigue. Sarah approached the bar knowing that anything over 2 minutes and 50 seconds would give her enough points to win the overall competition. Her grip felt secure initially, but by 1 minute and 30 seconds, her forearms were burning and her fingers were beginning to slip. The crowd had grown silent, recognizing that they were witnessing the climactic moment of something unprecedented. Sarah focused on her breathing, employing meditation techniques she had learned from rock climbing to manage the pain and maintain her grip. 2 minutes passed. Sarah was still hanging, her grip holding despite her forearms screaming in protest. Morrison watched with a mixture of competitive frustration and professional respect. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Sarah's grip was failing, but her determination remained intact. She had come too far and worked too hard to let victory slip away in the final moments. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Sarah equaled Morrison's time, but she needed 5 more seconds to win. Her grip was barely functional, held together more by willpower than muscle strength. 2 minutes and 50 seconds. Sarah had the time she needed, but her body was beyond normal limits. She held on for 3 more seconds before her grip finally failed, dropping to the sand after 2 minutes and 53 seconds. Master Chief Rodriguez consulted his calculations one final time before announcing the results to the assembled crowd. The silence stretched for what seemed like an eternity before he spoke. Final time for Chief Petty Officer Morrison, 4 hours, 37 minutes, and 12 seconds. Final time for Ms. Sarah Martinez, 4 hours, 15 minutes, and 48 seconds. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause that could be heard across the base. Sarah had not only beaten Morrison's record, she had destroyed it by over 21 minutes. Morrison was the first to congratulate her, his competitive disappointment overwhelmed by professional respect for what he had witnessed. "That was the most impressive athletic performance I've ever seen," he said, helping her to her feet. "You didn't just beat my record, you changed how I think about this event entirely." The aftermath of Sarah's victory rippled through the military community far beyond Coronado. Within days, her approach and techniques were being studied by special operations units across all service branches. Her integration of climbing techniques, endurance pacing strategies, and efficiency-focused obstacle navigation became the foundation for new training protocols. The Navy offered her a position developing advanced training programs for elite units. Recognizing that her civilian perspective and scientific approach had revealed improvements that military tradition had overlooked, she accepted, becoming the first civilian contractor to be officially integrated into Special Operations training development. Morrison requested to be her first student in the new training program, acknowledging that her victory had taught him more about his own potential than 2 years of defending his record. Together, they developed training methods that combined military toughness with scientific optimization, producing measurable improvements in elite unit performance. 6 months later, when the next quarterly gauntlet competition was held, 7 different participants beat Morrison's old record. Sarah's new record of 4 hours, 15 minutes, and 48 seconds remained untouched. But the event itself had been transformed from a test of individual dominance into a laboratory for human performance optimization. The question, "Do you mind if I try?" had evolved from a civilian contractor's polite request into a philosophical approach that challenged assumptions about capability, training, and the limits of human performance. Sarah's victory proved that expertise could come from unexpected sources, that technique could triumph over tradition, and that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs came from those willing to attempt what others considered impossible. Her story became required reading in military leadership courses, not because it demonstrated civilian superiority over military training, but because it illustrated the power of bringing fresh perspectives to established challenges. The Navy SEAL's initial chuckle at her request had transformed into institutional respect for an approach that made everyone better. Sarah Martinez had set out to test her theories about training optimization. Instead, she had revolutionized how elite military units thought about human performance and proved that the most powerful question in any field might simply be, what if we tried something different?